Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in our In the Garden program. My name's Renu Mirik. I'll be your moderator today, and our experts are Josh Demers and Robin Hammer. We are Montgomery County Master Gardeners with the University of Maryland Extension. Some of our services that we provide to the county include our speakers group, demonstration gardens, youth gardening programs, therapeutic horticulture, special events, and of course our Ask the Master Gardener program, to name a few. Today, Josh will be starting us off by talking about the berry border at Brookside Gardens, which is located in Wheaton. So over to you, Josh.
Okay, thank you. Let me share. Let's see. Okay, so thank you. As Renu mentioned, my name is Josh Demers. My position, I'm a lead gardener at Brookside Gardens. So I'll just give you a brief history of the gardens real quick. So Brookside Gardens, it actually opened July 13th, 1969. And at that point, there was only about 25 acres. If you can see this picture here, this is sort of under construction. And then this is actually the start of the formal gardens, which if you've been to Brookside, looks radically different than now. So again, it was originally comprised of the conservatory, 3 formal gardens, and the azalea collection. It only had but it had 35,000 visitors within the first year, which is a decent amount, and it only had 10 employees. So that was then versus now. So this is actually sort of the layout here. It's about 34 acres in cultivation, but 50 acres total. So it was actually the addition of the visitor center, which is this here, with the new parking garden with a lot of permeable paving for the parking spots. So again, about 54 acres, roughly 34 acres in cultivation. And we're actually up to about 30 career staff from the 10 in 1969. So really, when you think about the length of time, that's not many. That's only 20 full-time, the addition of 20 full-time staff. And then we have 50 part-time staff and over 1,000 volunteers. And that's in the gardens, the conservatory, visitor center, and so forth. So again, if you look at the visitorship last year, in 2020, we had about 850,000 visitors. So almost a million. Anyway, so that's just some brief history. I'll move on to the berry border. So in January of this year, 2021, the berry border was assigned to my work program. I also maintain the Goody garden, the Goody Japanese garden, and the viburnum garden. So just to dive into this, so, a true berry versus a berry-like fruit. So what is a true berry? It's a fleshy fruit without a stone or pit, formed from one flower with only one ovary. So it consists of an outer skin and exocarp, a fleshy middle, and then the innermost, the endocarp. So we can look at 2 plants. I think everyone's pretty familiar with the pawpaw, so Asimina triloba, and then Vaccinium corymbosum, which is high bush blueberry. High bush blueberry, very underrated. I try and push that plant as often as I can. So again, true berry versus berry-like fruit. So what we have here, or for example, a drupe. So it's a fleshy fruit with a center stone or pit that contains a seed. So these are some plants that we actually have in the berry border as of now. So Ilex verticillata, winterberry, Sambucus canadensis, American elder, which is this plant here. And then viburnum prunifolia, black hall viburnum, which is this here. Now for the palms, fleshy fruit consisting of outer thickened fleshy layer and a central core that contains many seeds. So again, we can think of amelanchier or just an apple, for example. So I just want to kind of go into, so because I was just assigned this area, I'm actually in the process of sort of redesigning, adding to it. So one of the things that I like to do is actually just get sort of a layout. So this is just like a Google Maps image And then, we obviously want to have the orientation with southeast west. So this is about the length of the area here. There's actually, you can see there's a stream. This denotes a stream here. And we have water that runs down from here, the Fragrance Garden, Maple Terrace over in here. So that's sort of a challenge in here. So trying to get plants that will survive in this sort of wet area. So again, these are some of the current conditions. Like in here, it's sort of bare. Again, because of erosion and that water that flows down, we actually want to plant. I want to plant, increase the plant density. It's a lot of the same texture, so I'm hoping I can get some different textures in here and eradicate some of this turf that's in here. Incorporate some more herbaceous perennials and shrubs. So again, touching on that, my renovation goals, expand the collection of fruit and plants, and that's to help teach the public the different fruit morphology. I mean, we are also, as horticulturists here, we also are here to educate. So again, incorporate pawpaw and then blueberry. And then I want to increase the understory plantings, including ground cover, to increase the beneficial insect populations, from an IPM standpoint, and also provide cover for wildlife. I want to increase the fall color. So blueberries, again, I'm a big pusher of blueberry plants. As long as you get your soil tested, you have the right pH, you can get them to grow. They have gorgeous shades of reds and orange. So again, reduce soil erosion because there is a creek nearby below actually down the slope from the berry border, by increasing the planting density. And then I want to decrease the turf area to reduce mowing, and increase area for perennial shrub plantings. This is sort of how I start out with goals and just the sort of overall site conditions. And then what I'll do from here is actually go into either hand drafting a design or using a software like SketchUp. It's just a little overview of what I'm working on now. One of the projects I'm working on now. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to me at this email. I check my work email pretty regularly, and thank you for allowing me to share. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Josh. That was really informative, and it was really interesting to hear your thought process as well as you're taking over the new section and how you're going to be rejuvenating it.
Yes, that's the goal.
Thanks for sharing.
Josh, question: are there guided tours back now at Brookside?
There are. Yes, there are. They are limited still in size. I actually helped out with. We had, I guess, 3 or 4 earlier. I think it was around February. So we do have them. They are still limited in size as of now. Good question. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Josh. So why don't we pivot now? And before we start our questions for this week, I just want to share a quick reminder. If you're watching live or catching the replay, please send in your questions for future shows to our Facebook group or send an email. Our moderator, Bev, will help us with posting that email address during the session today. And if you can share as much information as you can, photos are great. It helps us to diagnose any problems that we're looking at. That would be great. And then another reminder that you can watch our replays, not only on Facebook, but through our YouTube channel as well. If you search for In the Garden and Montgomery County, you'll find our channel. So just before we get into questions, the one thing that you're all probably seeing in your garden right now is the cicadas that are emerging. If you haven't caught our last episode, which was earlier this month, we actually had some resources posted. So I encourage, if that's of interest to you or you want a quick reminder, please check out that episode and the resources that we posted there. But with that, why don't we hop over to our questions that we've received? We've received 11 questions since our last call. And the first one is regarding the Cottony Camellia scale. So let me just share a quick overview of that question, and then Robin, I'll hand it over to you to explain through what we're seeing and some solutions. So the question we received was from Steve in Montgomery County. He asks that he has scales on his hollies, they're Nellie Stevens, and his camellias. The leaves are coated with a black sooty mold, and he can see that there are little scales all over the tips of the branches. What should he do? Some options that he thought of was perhaps horticultural oil. If so, when should he apply that? And he adds that the hollies are about 30 feet high.
Well, thank you, Anu, and thank you, Steve, for your question. I personally like the question. I like the situation, not unfortunately the way his is. I also have those hollies and some camellias all over, and really have enjoyed watching them in this area of the world. Unfortunately, it's a good reminder. We would love pictures whenever you can send pictures, because it would be great if we could show all of you, and I could see a little better of what the problem is. Whenever you are going to a clinic, or even for this show or program, it's always great to bring a picture, or you can just take one on your phone or whatever you have. It's a really important thing to do in management of this, to be looking at your leaves all the time. It's up and down. It sounds like it's a soft scale. Soft scale insects, unlike those with a hard exterior, excrete a sweet, sticky liquid known as honeydew. Although the soft scale insects are found mainly on twigs and branches, the honeydew will drip onto leaves, branches, and the soil below, which becomes sticky and shiny and will attract ants and a black fungus or mold. I think that beneficial parasitic insects may be sufficient to provide control of the scale if they're not harmed by the indiscriminate use of insecticides, including horticultural oil. The mold will persist until the source of this dew, the scale insects, has been removed, but eventually it'll flake off. Keep watching the plants nearby, the ground nearby, and make sure you're watch out for reinfection. I don't know, anything else that Renu, you or Josh can come up with?
Can't think of anything else. Josh, anything from your side?
No, I mean, I think one of the main, I think you hit the nail on the head, is, you want to be monitoring for it. Yeah. And luckily, I mean, I would say it's, a soft scale typically are usually a little bit easier to control than the armored scale. But yeah, I mean, I think you covered it. Good coverage of the answer.
I think the thing to do is obviously pay attention to what you have going on and growing on outside. It's a good day to do it right now.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Josh. Hopefully that answer really helps, Steve. Let's move on to our next question. This question is, we actually received it via phone call, and then we actually received a photo as well. So I think Bev will show that to our audience. The question is regarding a maple leaf. I think it's a Japanese maple, and it's not leafed out, but it does have buds. And the scenario is the tree's been there for over 15 years, and it's the first time that this has happened. A patio was built around the tree approximately 3 years ago and has a 4-foot diameter around the tree. And Milton is asking, what is wrong with my tree, and can anyone help? So for this one, Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Yeah. Great question. And thank you, Milton, for sending in a picture, because picture is worth 1,000 words. it's been there for 15 years, so the root system is pretty extensive already. But then you add this sort of patio in there, so between equipment and then the amount of people that were probably working on this patio, installing the concrete, the flagstone, and so forth, the soil was compacted, and I'm sure some of the roots were, well, most of the roots were impacted as well. So, with all that weight on it, you're really compressing the soil, which is reducing, or it's actually getting rid of the macropores, which is good for oxygen. I mean, we do need some oxygen in the soil, but we also want water to percolate as well. Otherwise, we end up with a sort of impervious surface. And then within that tree circle, it sort of becomes like a bathtub. So yeah, what's happened here? It's due to the construction. It may have died this year, but it was more than likely in decline. And with Japanese maples, a lot of times you can tell because you'll start to get individual stems or branches dying out of it. So the best thing to do is try and make, if you can, avoid doing any sort of work around an old tree, especially Japanese maple. Because the feeder roots again are in top 6 to 8 inches of soil, and also the drip line. The roots typically extend even further than the drip line. If you look at the picture, the patio is within the drip line, anyways. So again, this I would be willing. This died because of the impact from the construction. Unfortunately, because we know how slow Japanese maples are. But if you're going to go and replace it, what I would recommend is adding some more soil, maybe loosening the soil up in here, incorporating some more organic matter, and then you could try to replant in there.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Moving to the next question, we received this question from Harry, and he's asking about his tomato and jalapeno plants. So the scenario is that he has several plants. He has 1 tomato plant and 2 jalapeno plants that are not doing so well. But he has other plants. He has 4 other jalapeno plants planted at the same time and in the same conditions, and they're doing great. So he's asking for some advice on the struggling tomato plant and jalapeno plants. And some of the other conditions, he said, so he's planted them at the same hole depth. He's put the same amount of fertilizer. And he was wondering if he actually put too much fertilizer or didn't mix it correctly because they were all planted at the same time. He also notes that everything was covered up before frosts, so they should have been protected from frosts evenly. So in the research to answer this question, I actually came across an interesting statistic, which is that 90% of seeds and young plants that we get from the commercial sources do germinate and go well. But there is always the 10% that don't survive or don't thrive. One of the things that factors into that is whether those seedlings were stored for over 6 months before germination. So that might play in here. And so one way to combat that is to really make sure to set yourself up for success is to source those seedlings from reputable sources. So it could just be that a couple of those seeds had been stored longer than the others. I also want to make sure that when we select those seeds, we select them of the same variety, but we never get rid of that possibility that those seedlings may not take. So that's basically it. We're just thinking more about sourcing of the seeds, and it sounds like you've set the other successful plants up really well. So I think you've covered all the bases there. And then hopefully those 4 surviving plants will thrive. And you've got all the good conditions there. Robin, Josh, anything to add?
Well, I mean, I would say, I think there was some concern about it maybe being over fertilized. I mean, you could always get sort of a soil test done.
Mhm.
That would be an option, and then that way it could possibly help prevent any further, if it is over fertilization of the other plants as well.
I think things happen sometimes. You can have two plants next to each other, two tomatoes, and sometimes one is great and you get lucky, and the other just is just luck. Keep trying.
Keep trying. The garden is perseverance. Okay. Thanks so much. So let's turn to the next question. This is regarding weeds, and for this question, Josh, I'll turn it over to you. But let me recap the question. We've got an awful weed and asking about how to eradicate it. Mark from Montgomery County asks, how can he control this? It's everywhere, and there is more each year. It looks like Jack in the Pulpit, but smaller. Sometimes it grows to spathe. He spreads Roundup, but that does very little, except it makes the leaves turn brown along the edge. Any advice?
So this is the picture to me. The two pictures to me look like. Thank you for the pictures, by the way. It looks like Pinelia to me, tornata, which is actually crow dipper. I've encountered it personally a couple times here at Brookside, and really the only way to eradicate it is to dig deep and get that sort of corm out of there. Because if you try and just rip the top off, I mean, it's just going to regenerate. So again, the main thing is, I think, mechanical digging with a sort of what they call a drain spade would probably be the easiest. A long sort of skinny blade would be the best way to get it. And then that way, you can dig that core, lift it up, and then look for the corms, or just dispose of that whole sort of core you have there. That's the most effective way that I've found to eradicate that. And it's better to do it sooner rather than later, before they continue to just keep spreading and it becomes a bigger problem.
Great. Thanks, Josh. For our next question, it's regarding a serviceberry. So Bob in Montgomery County asks, I planted a serviceberry last year and it is about 6 foot tall. I noticed that the fruit it's forming has orange stuff on it, and some leaves are turning red and orange. What is it, and can I still eat the fruit once it ripens? I heard it could be from my junipers, and should I remove it? Robin, can you help us with that one?
I'd love to. I'm glad also we have Josh, the berry border expert, to answer more questions. So it loops like this is, Amelanchier. Is that how I'm pronouncing serviceberry lavis? It's Gymnosporangium rust, which is a rust that is on a lot of these junipers and other plants in that family. Serviceberry is in the Rosacea family, in the rose family, and is susceptible to the same diseases and insect problems as other species in the family, like apples and pears. This is often called cedar apple rust, I think, or something like that. So rust diseases, which are fungi, I guess, are common. To reduce the severity of the rust, you need to avoid planting the susceptible cedar and juniper varieties near the serviceberries. If they are already planted near these plants, probably removing the juniper is the most effective form of control. But remember that spores from nearby trees can be blown several miles, allowing that disease to continue. I did a little reading on eating regular serviceberries, and I think that serviceberries are supposed to be delicious and nutritious. Josh, have you eaten any?
I love them when I can get them before all the birds get them. Yeah.
But I think if we're going to be putting fungicide to protect this serviceberry, what happens then? They're not going to be edible then? Will they be? Or
Personally, I wouldn't. I mean, this is one of those things that it's almost, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you say, maybe remove juniper as like the alternate host. Typically it's not, it's more of an aesthetic issue, so much more so than say something that's going to maybe outright kill the plant. So it's sort of, from an IPM approach, it's sort of like, do what you can culturally and mechanically to sort of reduce the pressure of it.
So maybe not worry about the way it looks. If you can get the fruit off, the berries off, and it may harm the look, but it isn't harming the service berry itself.
Yeah, I mean, I could say, from personal experience, trying to get some of those that are affected, like the fruit itself, which is actually a palm, POME, as we've learned. It's usually it affects the way that the fruit is, so it's really going to be. It's almost as if it doesn't mature quick enough, I guess, is the way I could sort of describe it. So really, you're not going to want to eat those fruit anyway. So that's my sort of input or my opinion about that. But when you do get fruit that is unaffected, it is, like I said, very, very delicious. So
the best approach then would be to keep these plants apart and try to avoid this problem.
Exactly. I mean, from the IPM approach, I mean, that's really what it comes down to is, and you think about, the right plant for the right place. So it may not be the right plant when you have a juniper right next door. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Robin and Josh. So for our next question, Amy in Montgomery County asks, for the last couple of years, I've been planting a mixed border along my back fence. It was previously wet and weedy lawn, and this year I tried to make it look better. I used a weed whacker to cut the grass and weeds down to the dirt, and then I put in edging and put about 2 inches of double shredded hardwood mulch. Within days, grass started growing through the mulch. The bed is about 50 feet by 10 feet. And at this point, my question is, what is the best way to keep the weeds and the grass at bay? So you can see from the photo that Amy shared, it's a fairly large area, and of course is surrounded by grass. And one of the things that from the research, we were thinking that there may have been grass seeds actually in that mulch. And that would be an easy way for grass to start pretty quickly appearing. A couple of ways to tackle that would be the very manual process of hand pulling, maybe with a trowel to help. You could use some other approaches like a vinegar mix to kill weed and grass, or of course any spot spraying. The only challenge with anything that you're spraying is that you don't want to harm the plants. You only want to target that pesky grass that's growing through your mulch. So one technique would be, if you do want to go the aerosol route, is to really cover the plants and protect them from any downwind spray that may come. And then just like we talked about gardeners' persistence in one of our earlier questions, that might be the key here, because we think that you'll continue to have that grass starting to peek through and emerge through the mulch. And so you may need to just keep a really close eye on it, and some combination of hand pulling or one of the sprays or the techniques may need to be used. Also, because that grass may be perennial, though you might tackle it for this season, you may see that same grass emerging next season and beyond. So again, persistence might be the key here, but I think there's hope. So hopefully that's helpful, Amy, for you. For the next question, we've got the question regarding the viburnum aphids. So we have a few photos for this one. So this question comes in from Alice in Montgomery County. And she's asking, my viburnum leaves are curling and deforming and they have tiny bugs. What is causing this and attracting the bugs? And how can I protect both the plant and any of the other beneficial bugs that are in my garden? And for this question, we'll turn to Josh.
Okay. Yes, thank you again for the pictures. Very, very good, descriptive. Well, so yeah, what you have are aphids on your viburnum. And really for the most part, it just causes some aesthetic damage. So, if you have a lot of other shrubs, which it seems like from the first picture, chances are you may have beneficial insect populations as well. So you may just want to, what you could do is actually take a hose and just spray the aphids off. What that'll do is dislodge them, and chances are they will be back. But it will put sort of a damper on them. The damage that's here is already, it's here for this year. I mean, these leaves may end up dying and then fall off, and chances are the branch will push out new foliage. What's causing the curling is actually the aphids feeding on the sap in the cells, the juices in the cells. So that's what's causing the curling. What I would say is you can monitor, check your leaves, surrounding shrubs for any kind of beneficials, maybe such as like lady beetle larva. And if you don't see any beneficial insects, you can use insecticidal soap on them. But again, for the most part, this isn't going to kill your viburnum. It'll look slightly temporarily. These aphids, I believe, are pretty short. I don't think they'll be on the viburnum the whole season. So again, it's more of a temporary sort of aesthetic damage. But chances are this viburnum to me looks old enough and really healthy enough to really push out of it. And it looks like a viburnum carlisi to me, and I do believe that those are more susceptible to these aphids. Again, so you could hose it off with a strong stream of water from the like your garden hose. Or again, if you don't see any beneficial insects, you could use insecticidal soap. But my personal or my professional opinion would be to just leave it alone for now. And again, it'll recover. Okay, back to you, Anu.
Thanks, Josh. So our next question is from Susan in Montgomery County, and she has a question about carpenter ants. So she's looking for an alternative chemical treatment for getting rid of carpenter ants because she lives in a community with ground wells and is nervous about any chemicals that might get into the water supply that she has access to. So she'd like to find out if there are some other treatments available and if those treatments could be done by the homeowner or whether she actually needs to call in a pest control company that would use a safer treatment that may include chemicals but would be professionally applied. So thanks for the question. In terms of a homeowner solution, if there were any solutions that we would recommend, though we don't recommend particular brands, what we would recommend that you look for are labeled solutions that are designed specifically for this problem. That way you have key directions, specific instructions, and we understand the sensitivity because the potential impact here is into the water supply which you are consuming or using around your home. What we do recommend if you are unsure in any way is to seek some professional assistance with that, and then that way you can make sure that no chemicals are inadvertently introduced into the water that you're consuming. Anything else to add, Robin, Josh? Any ideas that we could share with our viewer?
No, I mean, I think you're right about, looking for specific if you are going to go that route of, whether it's chemical or some sort of control is, follow the label. The label's a law. But also, you could, talk to a professional, and then see if they have alternatives to say, if you talk to like a pest control company, maybe they have more natural or other approaches to that than say using a synthetic sort of chemical.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, and let's move on to our next question, which is focused on a dogwood. This question comes from Alex from Fairfax Station. And Alex asks that he has a Coosa dogwood that he planted last year. The tree is about 6 feet tall, but all the branches are small and all go way down the trunk, as you can see from the photo, all the way to the base of the trunk. Alex's question, should I prune off all but the few top branches? Please advise how the tree could be pruned. So over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Alex, for the photo and the question. I know you're calling from Fairfax Station. When I first moved to the area many years ago, I was in D.C., and I know I've called the same number asking questions. So I think that it's great to see that people from outside the area are asking, outside Montgomery County, because it is the area. So Coosa dogwood is a Cornus Coosa, a spring flowering tree or a multi-stemmed shrub native to Japan and Korea. It grows high, 30 feet high and wide, and typically blooms in late spring, May and June, about a month after our own native flowering dogwood, the Cornus florida, blooms. Flower buds develop on the previous season's growth, so pruning should be done immediately after the flowering is complete. So keep your eyes on it now. Coosa dogwood is generally treated more like a shrub with the separate branches. But to encourage that shrub-like look, the top third of the tree is often pruned away. But if you want to have more of a tree-like look, you are going to want to remove some of the lower branches to create an upward shape and expose the beautiful exfoliating bark that Coosa develops as it will age. Of course, you said, I believe this was last year planted, Renew, right?
Yes.
So you're going to want to wait to take any pruning probably for another year or two, maybe 2 or 3 years old for this tree. And, of course, a new tree, how would a 1-year-old tree do right now with the cicadas? Should it be, do you think, Josh and Renew, it should be bagged now, or will a 1-year-old tree be okay? Because that's a pretty new tree, and it looks kind of small. What do you think?
Yeah, you could. I think the main thing to remember is, the damage is going to happen from the cicadas when the females are ovipositing. So it's all about the timing. You wouldn't necessarily want to keep the netting on there for too long. So as soon as they're done ovipositing, or just before that they start, you want to put the netting on it, and then as soon as they're done, you want to remove it as soon as possible, because one of the things that will happen that I can kind of estimate is it's kind of like staking. Staking, people will stake trees and then forget about it, and then it ends up harming the trees. So same thing with the netting. So that's just something to keep in mind. As for would I net it, I probably would, because again, it is a young plant, and it does have relatively small diameter stems or branches. So definitely a good recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to emphasize that part about this young 6-foot tall tree. I know you want to shape it and make it more of if you're trying to make it more shrub-like or tree-like, you're going to want to shape it in that way. But you know that the general rule for pruning is never to take more than a third of the plants at a time. So looking again at this picture, even if you're going to take some from the top or some of the bottom, those bottom stems, keep that all in mind as you're looking forward and ahead to a nice long life with that beautifully flowering dogwood. Thanks.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Josh. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Alex from Fairfax Station, second question from you, and a good one. They have a mystery cocoon in their garden. So I think Bev, you'll show that photo right now. And the question is, what is this? It's been hanging here since early October 2020. So after taking a look at that cocoon photo, we realized this is called a bagworm cocoon. And the bagworm is it's called Psychidae. It's from a family of the Lepidoptera. It's a fairly small cocoon, and they're, in terms of measurement wise, can just range from 1/4 of an inch to 6 inches. The cocoon's constructed from silk and bits of leaves, twigs, and other debris, and it's used to encapsulate all those pupas of those bagworms. So they typically occur in the US from New England to Nebraska and south through Texas, and it's a home for those larvae to develop and grow, and eventually they will, grow large enough, and they will discard that cocoon. So just as a single generation, so not multi-generation. So to really answer the question in terms of what can you do, the easiest thing is to hand pick, of course, protect the hands if you need to, but really just physically move it away from that location and then keep protecting your fence or that piece of hardware that you have in your garden, and that will encourage those worms to not come back or not be located anywhere near there in the coming season. So hopefully that's a quick fix for the garden, and you won't need to see that cocoon there lasting through the season. In terms of our final question, so it's a question about a false cypress. The question comes in from Namita from Montgomery County. Thanks for sharing your question, Namita, and your photos. So her question is that she dislikes the false cypress that the previous owners have planted, but they're evergreen, and her husband really likes them. I think that they're too big, she writes, and so I prune them back and open them so sunlight can reach the inner branches. I hope to be able to prune them back about 2.5 feet, but I've also read that these shrubs will grow back if I cut them back to just stubs. So the question is really, how is the best way to make these shrubs smaller and keep them not too unsightly in that transition period? So Josh, I'll hand over to you for this one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you, Namita, for the question, and also the pictures, very detailed pictures. Yeah, I mean, this is, the joke is always that plants don't read their labels, so they typically, especially given age, I mean, they'll grow, for the most part, they'll grow bigger than what the label says, and I do see that there's a label down here. So if this is like a Nana, I mean, they do get big. I mean, there may be like they may be small relative to, say, a straight species, but that's still relative. So if it's the straight species, let's just say it gets 15 feet, and then the Nana gets 12 feet. Well, it's technically smaller, but so just keep that in mind. You are sort of you're on the right track in cutting these back. They do respond to pruning, so it will eventually push out some new foliage, especially since you've opened up sunlight to it. This is probably a little bit harder than I would have gone. You don't want to, it was kind of mentioned earlier, you never really want to remove, more than 1/3 of a plant at a time. So I would say wait for now to do any more pruning. You can always remove, if there's any dead wood in it, you can always remove that. And that's going to help with air circulation. Also light reaching in there, which will help initiate, hopefully there's dormant buds. So it's really more of a process over the year. It should never be just one fell sort of cut down and then hope it comes back. But as for the stubs, we try, whenever we prune, we're really trying not to leave stubs. And that's because you're going to have a big wound where you've cut. If you cut to a side branch, you hope that side branch will sort of continue that growth along that sort of stem or trunk. And then eventually that wound that you've made will cover over, not heal. Woody plants never heal, they cover over. So to leave a stub, it's another sort of joke that we have is it's pretty much a stick of sugar, because that's what's flowing through plants is sugar. So, by leaving a stub, that's actually could be a vector for insect as well, insect and disease, because they feed off of that. Again, you've cut back what you have now. I'd be hesitant to cut back any more, except for, like I said, dead wood. And just hopefully, wait until you start to see the response of the plant pushing out new foliage. And then you can go from there. But again, I would say at least wait till next year to maybe do any more. I think this goes back to, right plant for the right place. I mean, it looks like you have maybe a driveway nearby, and really, again, a constant pruning of these could help you maintain the size, but it looks like from the previous owners, they didn't really worry about the size of it too much and just sort of let it get larger. I have seen these sheared before. I personally don't recommend it. If you're going to cut these, go in with a pruning saw and your hand pruners, say Felcos or Okatsunis. And again, cut back to where there's some horizontal branching. And then that way you can go and selectively thin too, and again, increase the airflow in there and in the sunlight to help dry the foliage out, and then reduce pest pressure as well. So that's my my sort of they're definitely golden, and I think through doing a lot of pruning, you can get it back to that sort of that shape or size that you prefer.
Can I add one thing? I would add,
absolutely.
I agree totally with 100% with what you said, Josh, but as a further note to Namita, I know you say you hate the fall cypress. Okay, so the answer is compromise. Find something that you truly love that works with it and plant it nearby, and it'll all be fine. Work together.
That is another option, to remove it. Yep. Plant something else, and maybe something slower growing. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate it. So that actually rounds out our questions that we've received for this show. And Bev, can I just check with you if have any comments or follow-up questions come in while we've been live today?
No, I don't see any right now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Do let us know if any come in as we wrap up here. So just a few closing notes. So we encourage you to share any questions that we can answer on an upcoming show. You can reach us by posting a question on Facebook, and I think Bev will share our email address there as well if you'd prefer to connect with us that way. If you could please enter as much detail as possible in your questions, and as you heard today, we welcome your photos and any details that will help us to diagnose and provide a suggestion for your question or your problem in the garden. The cutoff for inclusion in our next session will be next Wednesday, May 26th at 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you get any questions or they come to mind, please post them or email us by then. And our next show will be on June 1st, which is the first Tuesday in June. We'll make every effort to answer your question on air, but if we run out of time during the show, we'll be sure to answer your question via email if you have shared your email address with us. So if there aren't any other questions, why don't we wrap it up there? And first of all, I'd like to thank my co-hosts today, Josh and Robin, for being our experts on air, and our whole research team, Sheila, Elsie, Monica, Pamela, Susan, Paula, Melissa, Linda, Leanne, and Amy. It's quite a team here, and we really appreciate all your help as our Master Gardener experts. And last but not least, thanks for our audience for joining us today. Again, our next program in the garden will be airing on June 1st, and don't forget to share those questions with us. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for letting me join in. Happy
Thanks,
gardening.
Josh.
Happy gardening.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.